Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné, and here are the top stories from across the continent. In Tanzania, the opposition says that security forces secretly dumped the bodies of hundreds killed in post-election protests. Human Rights Watch condemned the crackdown and urged accountability. The US says it's very engaged in Sudan's ceasefire talk. The Sudanese army chief is expected to respond to a proposal as fears grow of humanitarian collapse across Darfur. And away from violence and harsh reality, a community of artists in Kenya aims to help young people discover a creative future. The Wajukuu Art Project focuses on the intersection of art, education, and community empowerment. Following last week's election in Tanzania, the main opposition party, Chadema, claims that over 1,000 people were killed when security forces opened fire on demonstrators. Authorities allegedly began disposing of bodies in secret. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, who was declared the winner with more than 97% of the vote, faces growing international condemnation. Human Rights Watch denounced what it called a violent and lethal crackdown. Olivia Bizot has more.
After days of internet blackout, images are slowly emerging, including some that show bodies on the street. The opposition party, Chadema, says over 1,000 people were killed during last week's election violence and accuses security forces of secretly disposing of bodies.
For the past few days, we heard the reports that police are going in various hospitals, collecting dead bodies of those who were killed during the protests. And we hear some of them are being buried in mass graves. Okay, so these are the things that we want the international body like the UN to come and establish.
Western governments, including the UK, Norway and Canada, say they've seen credible reports of a large number of fatalities, while Human Rights Watch has condemned what it calls a violent crackdown.
Tanzania elections that have just concluded were clearly marred by violence. We've seen reports of abuses by the security forces, killings, the use of live ammunition, as well as tear gas against protesters.
President Samia Suluhu Hassan was inaugurated on Monday after being re-elected with almost 98% of the vote. She's blamed outsiders for the unrest.
Most of the youth that were arrested doing bad things came from outside Tanzania. Our security forces will investigate and return the nation to normal.
Suluhu first rose to power in 2021 after the death of former President John Magufuli. Her latest victory, the first in her own right, has been widely criticised as not credible, with key opposition leaders barred or detained before the vote.
The United States says it remains very engaged in efforts to broker a ceasefire in Sudan, but admits the situation is highly complicated. Violence is once again escalating after more than 2 years of civil war, and the humanitarian crisis is worsening, particularly in Darfur following the Rapid Support Forces takeover of El Fasher. As pressure builds, the Sudanese army chief is expected to respond to a US-backed ceasefire proposal. Elisa Herbert reports.
In this makeshift camp in Tawila, thousands have found temporary safety after fleeing El Fasher. They are among some 65,000 people believed to have left the Sudanese city that has been seized by the Rapid Support Forces. Their stories tell of a situation spiralling out of control, of gender-based and ethnic violence, rapes and executions.
The Rapid Support Forces have beaten and humiliated us. They took all that we had and left us with nothing. I cannot find my husband, and I don't know if he's dead or alive, or where he is.
In the streets along our displacement route, we found a lot of bodies. We found bodies of women and youth. There is no one to bury them.
The International Criminal Court has expressed grave concern, saying the acts in El Fasher may constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. Fighting has also surged in the Kordofan region, one of the last Sudanese army strongholds in Darfur. The UN Secretary-General is calling for an immediate ceasefire and for the international community to use its leverage.
And one thing that is essential to stop the fighting is to make sure that no more weapons come into Sudan. And that is another essential objective. And at the same time, we need to create mechanisms of accountability because the crimes that are being committed are so horrendous that they cannot benefit from any kind of impunity.
International criticism has mounted on the United Arab Emirates, which is accused of supporting the Rapid Support Forces. However, the UAE claims it wants to see a return to a civilian-led government that discludes both warring parties. Sudanese army representatives were set to consider a US-backed truce proposal on Tuesday.
It's now official. The Constitutional Council in Ivory Coast has confirmed President Alassane Ouattara's re-election for a fourth term after he won nearly 90% of the vote in last week's presidential election. The council reported no major irregularities and said it received no complaints, but while the vote was largely peaceful, at least 11 people were killed in isolated incidents, and turnout was low, as just over 50%, especially in some opposition strongholds. Now to the island of Gorée off the coast of Senegal. It's famous for its house of slaves. It is also Senegal's top tourist destination, attracting 500,000 visitors each year. But now, what is known as a symbol of the transatlantic trade is under threat from coastal erosion. And the island's centuries-old architecture has started to decay, forcing the government to finally take action, as our correspondents in Dakar explain.
Residents of Gorée Island are watching the sea creep dangerously closer to their homes. The historic site, known for its role in the transatlantic slave trade, has long been threatened by coastal erosion. Now a seawall is being built for protection, much to the relief of residents like Mamadou.
It's a feeling of satisfaction as a Gorean from a family that's lived here for generations. My grandparents and parents were born here. Without protection, Gorée would have disappeared. Without this seawall, the island would have been split in two.
Spanning 1.4 kilometres around the island's perimeter, the three-layered structure is designed to protect the UNESCO World Heritage Site. French construction company NGE says the project will cost around 9 billion CFA francs.
It will act as a breakwater. The waves will crash against the seawall, which is designed to withstand the swells recorded in Senegal. This will prevent the waves from striking the island directly, effectively protecting it and preventing further damage.
Coastal erosion is not the only threat, though. Many of the island's century-old buildings are also deteriorating due to years of neglect. Advocate Sally Alsen-Tiam says it was recent events that inspired a film earlier this year, a call to protect Goré's crumbling architectural legacy.
The goal is to raise awareness, to find companies willing to help save these buildings where people still live. There's a real risk of human loss if they collapse. But more than that, it's about protecting what belongs to us. These structures are not just buildings, they're witnesses of our history.
Gorée Island's new protective seawall is scheduled for completion in March 2026.
In Kenya, a community of artists is helping to inspire the next generation of talent. Located in Nairobi's Mukuru slums, the Wajukuu Art Project aims to help young people discover a creative future away from the grim and often violent reality they face. Laurent Bersecher.
Beneath the rusty rooftops of Nairobi's Mukuru slums, dozens of children are learning to paint and draw. A new form of self-expression for many of these young Kenyans that can help them channel their emotions through art.
We know the way of life here. We know the challenges. You are in a small room and everything is happening there. And there's nowhere that you will go and be asked to share or to let it out. So most of the kids, they are adults before they are adults.
The Wajukuu Arts Collective was founded in 2004 by a group of local teenagers seeking refuge from their daily reality. In an area plagued by crime and police brutality, art was for them a way to escape and to forge their own path. Over 20 years later, the collective has evolved into a safe space for young artists and children, providing a rare creative outlet in a community where issues of mental health are often dwarfed by financial concerns.
Because of economical struggle, parents do not pay attention to what their kids are going through, and emotional struggle or mental struggle, this comes like a secondary need, and mostly when it's already like a big problem. But with art, I think is a tool of processing the inner burning, the inner thoughts, the inner doubts.
More than a space for self-expression, the collective actively seeks to empower young talents to make a living through their art. Around 30 emerging artists and over 150 children regularly attend classes and training programs in Wajukuu and hope to one day see their works featured in museums in Kenya and beyond.
Thousands of visitors are now flocking to the Grand Egyptian Museum, where for the first time nearly 4,500 treasures of King Tutankhamun are being displayed together. Open in a lavish $1 billion ceremony overlooking the Giza pyramids, the museum is now one of the largest in the world. The new collection offers an unprecedented look into ancient Egyptian life and royalty, to the delight of visitors.
We came on a girls' trip for the week to see the Grand Egyptian Museum opening, and we saw the King Tutankhamun exhibit, and it was incredible. It brought me to tears. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Actually, I might cry again.
I just can't believe how they were able to do all these carvings out of stone, and how heavy the material, and how they just did it back in the day without really any tools, you know.
One of the wonders of the world. To conclude today's edition of Eye on Africa, thank you for joining us, and we hope you do so again.